Hey there, I'm so excited. It's that time of year again. It's like Christmas for developers, and you're a student developer, so it's Christmas for you as well. The dates for WWDC were announced. For those who don't know, WWDC stands for the Worldwide Developer Conference. It's the show that Apple puts on every year for developers, where we hear about new technologies coming down the pipe or really interesting ways to use frameworks that we already know about, like AV Foundation, or we learn about the new wrinkles we're going to be working with in Swift UI, or we hear about amazing new things like Swift Playgrounds 4, that was announced last year, that allows us to build apps and ship them to the App Store from your iPad. This is amazing stuff. And we're focused now on the Swift Student Challenge. That's where you and your students get to show off your creativity and your passion and all the stuff that you've learned about coding in a project of your own. So this is a special challenge. You're allowed to submit a project. Apple engineers will check it over and evaluate it, and winners will be awarded all sorts of fun stuff. You get some cool gear. You'll get Apple engineers looking over your code and get some access to some really interesting folks. So I highly recommend that you put your project in there. It's a real badge of honor if you are a Swift Student Challenge winner, because there are some really impressive kids who have won this in the past. So first off, what is Swift? Maybe you're coming to this brand new and you're like, what on earth is Swift? What does it have to do with a student challenge? Well, Swift is Apple's open source programming language for building iOS apps and Mac apps and apps for the watch and tvOS. It's a really great language. It has a bunch of amazing features. It focuses a lot on safety, on being a fast language, and being expressive. Those are kind of the three major features of Swift. And my personal favorite is it's a fun language to use. Okay, so that out of the way, what is the Swift Student Challenge then? Exactly. Well, it's a contest, so it does have some T's and C's, and since we know no one ever reads those, what we're going to do is we're going to go through those now. We're going to focus on three major areas. One, the deadline, most important for any good programmer. We're very good at blowing right past those. Two is the application eligibility requirements. You don't want to put a lot of effort and sweat and tears into your project if you're not even eligible for this challenge. And then the submission requirements. The very worst thing would be at the final hurdle you fall because you don't have the right project format, or you don't have it in the right language, or you haven't really listened to what it is they're asking for. So we're going to go take a look right now and see what there is in the T's and C's. For many of you, this will be the first time you've ever seen T's and C's in your life, and maybe it'll be the last. So this is the Swift Student Challenge page. There's an Apply Now button. We're going to take a look at what's on the application form in just a little bit. But first, we'll scroll down. We have a very quick shot of some of the requirements, like what we need to do to apply, how we can build. And we're going to come back to this in just a little bit. Some of the requirements, and a link off to the forums. And we're going to look at all of those in details. We've got a relatively short message about completing your submission and some of the dates. So submissions are open now. They opened on Tuesday, April 5th, and they're going to close on Sunday, April 24th, 2022 at midnight. Now that's California time. So if you're in Europe, like a lot of the folks that I know, you've got a bit of extra time, but I would really encourage you to aim for that Sunday deadline, because I know very well as a developer that it's very easy to miss deadlines. And if you start aiming for the exact minute that it's due, there's a good chance something's gonna go wrong at the end. You're gonna run into some issue or another. So aim for the Sunday. Try to get it done. Have a padding of about 9 hours or so, just so you make sure you get that submission in. It talks a little bit about the judging, but we're gonna have a look at the full terms and conditions. For those of you who swore you'd never read them, I apologize in advance. So like I said, first things first, that deadline is the most important thing. We want to make sure that we get our project in on time. The very next thing is we want to make sure that we're eligible to submit a project. So these are the requirements. In the US, you have to be 13 years old or older. In Europe, you have to be 16 or older. Now, there is a caveat to that. There's a way around that if you are younger and you have a great idea for your Swift Student Challenge. You need to be registered for free with Apple as an Apple developer or be a member of an Apple Developer Academy. We'll talk about it in a second. You need to fulfill one of the following requirements. This is with regards to considering yourself a student. You need to be enrolled in an accredited academic institution. You need to be enrolled in a STEM organization's educational curriculum. Be enrolled in the Apple Developer Academy, or you've just graduated high school and are waiting to get into your next accredited academic institution. And you cannot be employed full-time as a developer. You also can't win this more than 4 times. You can win it multiple times, but you can't win it more than 4 times. I think they love to see new developers. I love to see new developers coming along and showing off what they've got. And I'm always impressed with folks coming new to the field. So it gives some details on what a STEM organization is. And we're going to see down below here in the submission requirements that we have to provide proof that we belong to one of those academic institutions. So maybe our course schedule or proof of enrollment. Now to get back to the age thing. So there is a block here that says that if your legal guardian sends an email to swiftstudentchallenge@apple.com, you can grant permission for your student to enter into the challenge. So if you're less than 16 in Europe and you really want to enter in the Swift Student Challenge, just have your legal guardian send a note to swiftstudentchallenge@apple.com and you should be allowed to enter. So that's the eligibility. That's the deadline. The submission requirements. Now this is where you want to make sure you have all of these satisfied. It's just like as if you were shipping an app to the App Store. You want to make sure that you have the preview images in the right size and the right amount for the right devices. You want to make sure you have pictures of your app icon, all the pieces in place so that your app will get approved by the App Store and put on the store. Same thing with the challenge. You want to make sure you've satisfied all of these submission requirements. So it says you have to, of course, complete all the required fields on the submission form, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Provide proof of enrollment in the class. Your submission this year must be a Swift Playgrounds app project. So it's a .swiftpm suffix on that file in a zip file. So you want to compress that file and upload it to the submission form. This is different than previous years where it was a playground book that you were submitting. We shouldn't rely on a network connection. For example, if you built a NASA photo app of the day, you can't go off and hit a web service in your app. You have to make sure that it runs without network access. So maybe keep your resources locally if it's a photo app of the day. The zip file can be up to 25 megabytes in size, and it must be fully functioning. So you want to make sure that you've tested this both on the device that you're writing on, if you're writing on an iPad, and maybe on an additional device if you can. Share the project to someone else so that they can have a look and run through it and make sure it's fully functioning. There's nothing worse than submitting your project and saying, oh, it works on my device, and not having it work on another. You also have to have it fully functioning in Swift Playgrounds, the very latest version, 4.0.2, or in Xcode 13.3. So if you only have access to a Mac and Xcode, use the latest version and you'll be able to create a Swift Playgrounds app just the same. All content should be in English. For example, if it's a translation app, of course you'll have some content in Japanese or Ukrainian or what have you. But you want to make sure that the main user interface and the directions and everything are done in English, as that's who's going to be judging the project. You also have to provide an essay answer on the submission form. I'll show you that in just a second. And this one's interesting to note that it must be created by you as an individual. So it's not really for group work. But you can use work that other people have done in your project. So like, for example, you can take the app gallery that we're also going to take a look at in just a second and use some of that work as the basis for your project. And then we have some other legalese here. We only submit one time per challenge, and we only submit them through that form. It has a bit of information about the judging and reasons for disqualification. So I highly recommend going through these. And it also talks about the awards, so what you're going to get if you are successful in your Swift Student Challenge. So let's go have a look at the application form. So when we apply, we're going to have to log in with our developer account. That's why you need that free account. It's going to fill in some info for me. We can put in our phone number. We mark our age. Now, I will have info about our guardian if we're 13 to 17. We can pick our gender, ethnicity, how did we learn to code, what status we have, which institution we belong to. So we're going to have to provide proof of that. This is where we're uploading our project. We're just going to pick a file from our desktop. Just like with any good testing, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. You want to pick the software you should use to run the app project. So did you write it on Swift Playgrounds 4.0.2? Is that where the judges are going to try it out? Or are they going to try running it from Xcode 13.2.1 on macOS? Did we use open source software? That's another good question. It's allowed, so it wouldn't disqualify you. It's just a way of checking to see if you did took advantage of someone else's software that they wrote. And they also check to see that you have the rights to all the content in the app. So if you use any music or images or video, make sure that you've got the rights to it. This is the essay they mentioned. Now it's fairly short. It's 350 words or less. And they just want you to talk about the features and technologies used in your app project. And there are other opportunities to let the judges know a little bit about you. Beyond WWDC 22, apps on the App Store, if you have any on the App Store. Now, obviously, you can't be a full-time developer. Maybe they're trying to catch you out. And then some information about your size if you do get awarded a winner as in the Swift Student Challenge. In your mailing address, some other comments, and then if you're smart, put your CV in there, so maybe you get poached for a job at Apple. The terms and conditions, which we've already kind of run through by watching this video, and then check that box and you're ready to go. So that's your terms and conditions. Really important to make sure that we've got everything together well before that 24th of April date. And I want to show you some of the other stuff that we have, some of the other supports we have here. So we have this link off to the provided templates. We're going to get back to that in a second. This student challenge tag on the Apple developer forums is a great place to start. If you have questions about how to do something, maybe some of the requirements, if they're already up and running and people are asking questions already. There's a question about using a machine learning package in a Swift Playgrounds app. Lots of great questions already. You can submit your own, especially as you'll have your own developer account to go file some questions here. Now just note the link at the top at the moment is a little bit broken. We'll just change that to WWDC 22 instead of 21. And the other link that we saw here was the provided templates. So this is if we do need inspiration or we need a bit of guidance on what do we use? How do we write code that's going to use the accelerometer in the device or the gyroscope? We have a great example of making network requests. Now we can't do that in our submission for the Swift Student Challenge, but this app gallery that's available in Swift Playgrounds 4 is amazing because it gives you some great ideas and ways of doing certain tasks. So when we hit Get Started, we have a tutorial about me, the Choose Your Own Story, the Date Planner app, organizing with grids, recognizing gestures. And we can walk through these tutorials. Now, we won't get into the code too much just yet. In fact, we won't get into it for a while. But this is a really nice way to learn a little bit more about code. Even if you're brand new to coding, this will walk through some of it and explain what's going on in each section. And it highlights the section that it's talking about. So really, really useful to work through. Okay, so that's the Swift Student Challenge from technical details, like how do we submit to it and all the rest. Now, the next question is, what do I build? It's a special challenge. You're submitting to Apple, so even if you do the same as if you're submitting to anybody, you try to find out what do they care about, what's important to them. It's the same as if you were building an app for a specific person, your brother, your sister, your parents. What do they care about? What's going to really resonate with them? Well, Apple kind of has made it easy because they have a set of values published on their webpage. If you look at the footer of any of their web pages, they have a whole set of values that they really, really care about. We've got accessibility. We've got education, the environment, inclusion and diversity, racial equity and justice, privacy, and supplier responsibility. And the really nice thing is they've all got their own web page, so you can go read a little bit more about, well, what does that mean exactly? What is their value in education exactly? What do they mean when they care about the environment? So you can go have a look at one of these, and maybe this becomes the theme for your project. So I'm going to go take you just very quickly, and we'll have a look. So if we just go to apple.com, and we flick to the bottom, we'll see that we have our Apple values there. So if we look at the environment, for example, we can see the progress report for 2021. You can see some of the goals that Apple has and what it means by it values the environment. So every single one of these values has a page that we can read a little bit more and learn about what it is Apple really cares about. So if we build our project around something that Apple values, that we value as well, this is going to make a huge difference in our submission. And the judges are really going to appreciate that touch. So take a look at these themes. Have a little think, maybe have a read through some of the pages and think about, what is it I want to tackle? What do I care about? What's important to me and my local community? I know locally here we have a bunch of really nice beaches, and we have an amazing teenager here who runs beach cleanups. So that's something that's very important, and it's for the environment in our local area. I personally care a lot about education and making sure that every child has access to education and that we can all benefit from that extra knowledge. So what are you going to tackle? What's the theme that you're going to approach? So have a think about that, because that's going to affect what you're going to build. Now, once we pick a theme, say we did pick the environment. Now, what would we do with our beach cleanup idea? We're going to take that from a theme and turn it into an idea that we can turn into an app. So maybe with the environment, we would take the beach cleanup example. We'd say, I'd love to have an app where we can organize the local community to go down and clean up the beach. Maybe we're taking turns. Maybe it's a big social event. Maybe we're focused on as well, what do we pick up? What are we finding on the beach? Are we finding a lot of microplastics? Are we finding huge wooden pallets that we found the other day? Are we finding styrofoam or plastic cups, swimming trunks? What are we finding on the beach? And should we catalog that somehow? Can we recycle some of this stuff? What beaches were covered? Were there certain beaches that were missed? Maybe we can do some location stuff and make sure that everyone's covered a certain beach. So we can just start to stick a few things to the wall. That's just for the environment, maybe for education. I know we have some refugees joining our local volleyball club. Maybe we're going to do a translation app to help translate common volleyball terms into different languages, from English or from Irish or into Ukrainian or Arabic, so that we can include all students who want to come play with us. We've got lots of things that we can do to generate some ideas. So what are you going to build? Now take a little while to think about that. Maybe pause the video. And I won't go on pause, because what we're going to do is talk to you a little bit about some tools for taking that idea then that you have and developing it into something you can use for the Swift Student Challenge. Luckily, Apple's provided two amazing resources. One is called the App Design Journal, and it has a process that looks a little bit like this. And the great thing about this process is that this is very similar to the process that we followed when I was an engineer at Apple. Now, we maybe didn't have it written down quite like this, but when we were looking at new features or new products, we would brainstorm first and think about, all right, well, what is it? What feature? Or maybe what feature should we develop? Blue sky, I don't even know. Or maybe we had some guardrails and said, all right, well, we have to do something with video playback. Then after the brainstorming phase, you take the ideas that have come out of that and you start to plan. That's going to be a really important part of your process here in the Swift Student Challenge, because we've only got a very short amount of time. So we need to stay very focused and make sure that we're staying on task. It's going to be very important that you have a quality product at the end. So this planning phase is where we start to winnow down the ideas. We may have a ton of ideas, but if we focus on just one, we can do it really well and make sure that that idea really shines. And then we have the opportunity to go back and do some more. Even though this is sort of a linear drawing across the screen, this is very much a cyclical process. We go back again and again, and we go back to brainstorming, back to planning, back to prototyping, back to evaluating. So after we've planned and we've figured out our one feature that we want to focus on, we'll go to prototyping. That's where we'll build out a little test example of it. It might be with code. It's probably with something like Keynote. We'll just sketch out the user interface. And we'll have a look and see, hey, does this work? Is it worth investing more time in? Or do we go back to the drawing board and maybe pick a different idea? We can even test it out in that evaluation phase, hand the prototype to somebody who the prototype is meant for. If it's for your brother, or if it's for a beach cleanup crew, give it to somebody who's interested in cleaning up the beach, or somebody you're trying to attract into cleaning up the beach. And ask them, what do you think about this? Let's give them some specific guided steps to go through. All right, imagine we're going to go down to the beach. How would you schedule your time going down there and picking up? Where would you get your resources? How would you identify trash on the beach? How would you like to identify trash on the beach? Go through all those steps and then apply the answers that you get to your prototype and bring it back to the brainstorming phase and say, okay, maybe that didn't work. Maybe I'm asking the wrong questions. Is it really smart to say, how do you identify trash? So we have to think about the process a little bit here. So that's the App Design Journal. The other resource that Apple's provided is called the App Design Workbook. This is a much bigger resource. The process is defined a little bit differently, but it's still very similar steps. We have a definition phase where we define the problem. We do things like brainstorming. We prototype. We try out what a flow is going to look like or what the UI is going to look like. And then we test it. We spend a lot more time in this version of the process thinking about, well, how do we design our tests? We don't just hand somebody the prototype and say, here you go, run away with it. What do you think? No, we have to give them some guided questions. Give them a script. Say, okay, I want you to try to step through this user interface and figure out how to log a piece of trash, its location, maybe its weight, what type it is, can it be recycled or not, and then tally up your total at the end. Okay, then you give the device to the person, they try working through those steps, and then they can give you feedback. Actually, I was very confused as to what was going on. And in the iteration stage, that's when we can figure out, okay, well, based on their answer, where do we go back to now? Do we need to go way back to the drawing board and just define it all over again because it's just not working? Maybe the prototype, the design doesn't work. It's not clear what they're supposed to do from the prototype. Or maybe your test isn't written very well. Maybe the script for your test was too confusing and it wasn't clear from your script what the user was supposed to do. So there's lots of things to think about. In fact, let's go take a look. We're going to open up the app design workbook. Here's the app design journal, which is just a smaller resource. It's got the steps laid out here. And you can flip through this slideshow. It tells you how to prototype in Keynote. But it gives you some great questions to work through. So once you have your idea for your app, this is where you go to say, all right, well, what is it we're trying to solve here? Maybe we're trying to build a quiz to educate people about women in science, or about health. Or maybe we're actually trying to build a health tracker. Maybe we're working on a health app that has a bit of both. It has a quiz to help people improve their knowledge about their health and maybe the food they're eating. But then also, we're going to use some of the sensors maybe in the Apple Watch that'll detect heart rate or how often they're exercising. Well, that's loads of ideas. So we want to winnow that down and say, all right, well, maybe the watch is a bit advanced. Let's focus on the quiz to improve people's knowledge around their health with regards to food. So that's the App Design Journal. The App Design Workbook gives you another look at the app design cycle. And I particularly like this picture here because it does emphasize that this is a cycle. It goes around and around. And in fact, there should probably be spokes in this wheel that go from iterate back to define, back to prototype, and then back to test as well. Because we don't have to necessarily start from the beginning every time. And there's some great pointers for figuring out, well, where do I go next? What do I do with this feedback that I got from people? So let's have a quick look at a couple of my favorite pages here. So when you're working through this, you've got your app idea, you're getting ready to start winnowing down ideas. My favorite page of all of them in this workbook is slide 8. And my favorite line is this: be observant and keep an open mind. Way too often, it's a creative endeavor, coding, right? We invest a lot of blood, sweat, tears, passion, excitement, and it can be very easy to get your heart broken when maybe your idea doesn't work out so well. So if you keep an open mind when you're getting that feedback back, and you follow the process and you do things like prototype, so it's a bit less friction and it's a little bit less work on your part, you're not as upset when someone says, oh, actually, this is lousy. And you come back going, you know what, from that feedback, I don't think this idea is going to work out. But that's okay. That feedback's going to help me build something even better. So keep an open mind when you're approaching this process, and the cycle's going to feel a lot better and a lot more productive because you're going to say, okay, that one didn't work out. That's cool. That's what this process is for. Let's go back and start over. Because there's nothing worse than shipping an app that people just don't care about and they don't use, or that you don't care about in the end and that you're not proud of. You want to be proud of this thing that you submit to Apple. Okay, so in the definition phase, this is where we're walking through things like, well, observing. This is where we're thinking about, well, based on our theme, what kind of things do people need based around the environment? We can explore our users. This is where this is going to help you more than almost anything. If you can pick one or two specific people, this is kind of generic. Okay, cool. We're aiming this at a father of 2, kindergarten teacher, taking online classes in photography. We can fill out this same thing ourselves. Maybe it's an app for your brother or sister. Maybe they've got issues with their eyes or with their hearing, and you want to build an app to help them experience things that you get to experience. Or you want to teach someone about a situation you're in that other people can't experience. So that you're going to write down that person and some of their attributes and who you're aiming this at, and really focus on that person. If it's great, if it's an actual person that you can hand the device to and they can try it out, because then you can really prove out your ideas. So then as we keep going, we can analyze, we can look at causes. This is one of my favorites. This will help us decide maybe what we want to build. So this is the capabilities on the devices that maybe we just didn't think about because we kept taking them for granted. Things like Bluetooth, speech recognition. That's an amazing one, especially for making inclusive apps. Image processing, including things like detecting objects in a photo, like a dog or a ball. Haptics, so we can get physical feedback from the device when something happens. Access to the microphone and speakers. What can we do with those? Augmented reality. Is that going to play a big role in our app? The camera. Is that the kind of stuff that we can use in our app? So if you're stuck for ideas and you're thinking, well, how do I build my app? What am I going to do with this? I have an idea, great, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. This page may help kickstart some of those creative juices. Think about it. How are you going to use a map? I can think how I might use it on a beach cleanup app. We can detect, which beaches we're on. We can kind of show people on a map where cleanups are going on right now if they want to join in and they have some free time. We could use image processing to detect the type of trash and maybe machine learning to figure out, okay, well, this is a pair of swimming trunks and we can recycle these. So this is a great page to get unstuck if maybe you're a little bit at a loss for what it is you're going to do. Okay, so this is for getting inspired. The planning phase this is where we're going to define features. And most importantly, especially for this challenge, you're going to prioritize. So like I said, with a few of the examples, we can come up with lots of examples. Oh my God, we can do a quiz. We can do this and the other thing. But we want to make sure that we focus so that we have a really quality offering. Our final submission should be really, really well done, really polished. And in our essay, we can note, hey, this is the idea for the larger version of this app. When I have more time, but I only have 2 weeks, that's a really short amount of time to develop a really great app in. Now, we're going to try to get you going as best as we can. So the define section is really important. So slide 29, that's where we're going to learn about planning and getting our features defined. This is an example of a recycling app and all the different things that the app is going to need to do. Now, that can be really intimidating when we define all the features of the thing that an app is going to do. But don't worry, we don't have to do all of them at once. In fact, for this project, I would only focus on one of them. That's where we prioritize the features and we say, okay, let's list our top 3. And of those, at the very most, we're going to do 2 of them. I would highly recommend you stick to 1. Focus on the one feature. In this case, okay, cool, log trash and recycling. Maybe for the beach cleanup app, we forget about all the cool community stuff we could do, and we focus on let's just identify trash on the beach. Maybe we have to do it by hand at start. We can't jump right into machine learning straight out of the gate. But we can build that base feature first. All right, cool, I can log the trash. I found swimming trunks. I found old cans, bottles. Now I'm ready to move on. Maybe once I've proved that out and people are like, yeah, I like this. I'd like to go further with it. That's when we would add the machine learning and the really difficult stuff. Okay, so this is a huge step. This is all of our definition phase. We've kind of figured out what it is we want to build. We've based it on a theme. We've got our app idea. We've winnowed it down to maybe 1 or 2 features. Cool. We've got a huge whiteboard full of ideas, and we've circled that one big feature, and that's the thing that we're going to work on. Okay, so what do you do next? Do we jump into code? Not yet, because I know this is a Swift student challenge. We haven't even touched Swift yet. The next phase, if you're smart, is to go prototype. This is going to be a very low friction way for you to get into being able to test out your idea without having to write code. Because once we start writing code, we do get emotionally attached to it. And there are tears when we get rejections and we're like, this doesn't quite work the way I want it to. So we want to come up with a map. So as we're focusing on just one feature, maybe we'll do the rough map of all the different screens that we might have if we've got a community piece and the trash pickup piece and the beach locator piece. But when we start to winnow it down, we're going to still, even for the prototype, focus on that one feature. So we can do things like add interface elements. There's a really nice Keynote template out there called iOS UI elements that Apple provides that you can actually just drag in elements that look like native iOS elements. So things like buttons and text fields and all the rest. So you can actually make it look a lot like a real app. And this app design workbook will show you how to build a prototype like that. I know a lot of you are already familiar with Keynote prototyping. And then we refine it. Here's an example of the Go Green app that they've prototyped. And they've talked about here adding, different size tap targets. Do we make them a bit bigger because maybe they're too small? Depends on our audience too. Does our audience have a harder time hitting a smaller target? Or maybe our audience is used to using a different style app. We've got a whole group of users who've never used TikTok. So maybe they won't be that familiar with the way TikTok works or Snapchat or other apps. Maybe they're used to using slightly older models. So we have to try to think of our users, and that specific user that we found earlier in the definition phase is going to be really important. So that's Keynote prototyping. We've been through that a few times. But this is the section that's really built out in the app design workbook, is the testing section. And it has a massive word like architect. We want to really design how our tests work too. We're not just designing our user interface and designing how our code is laid out. We want to design our tests and how people are actually using our app and evaluating it. So we want to define our tests. This is a great example for the recycling app. These are certain things that a user has to be able to accomplish, certain tasks. So if they're not able to do those, then we have to go back and refine our prototype or maybe redefine our app altogether because it's not fulfilling what we expect it to fulfill. Another really important thing you can do when you're asking someone to test something is write a script. So we write some test scripts and say, all right, this is what we're going to go through. We can anticipate problems people might run into. In fact, it may help inform the code later because we may say, oh, that's right, we're going off to a network. What happens if the network is down or the person's out somewhere very remote? How are we going to handle that case? So we have to start thinking of all those edge cases as well. And this is going to make our app so much more robust by the end of things. Then we're going to gather our users. Now, it makes sense to gather the people who you actually want to use your app. That person that you identified very early on, your brother, your sister, your parents, whoever it is, your local community, hand it to those people who are actually going to use your app. And this is when we validate. So we're going to take a lot of notes while people are using it, or we're going to ask them to take notes. And it's going to have all the feedback that they give us throughout their experience. Oh, I couldn't figure out how to join a beach cleanup group. You know what? The buttons were too small for me to enter in that piece of trash that I picked up off the beach. What do I do now? And at the end of this validation stage, this is a really nice piece of this whole app workbook, this iteration section. Because slides 123, 124, and 125 will give us a map for where we go in the cycle. So if we heard comments like these, I needed to use two hands. Okay, well, you know what? The main user that I wanted to pitch this at was my brother-in-law, and he's got a small kid, so he's always got somebody in one hand. So he's only able to use one hand on the phone. That's not going to work for him. All right, so I have to go back to definition and consider the type of users that I'm accommodating. They wanted a different feature. All right, maybe we're actually aiming at the wrong thing. Maybe people don't want a beach cleanup app. That's not the important thing to them is picking up the litter. Maybe it is more the social aspect. So we can focus on that one first. In the second iteration section, we can talk about prototyping. You know what, I wasn't able to read the content. Maybe, okay, we'll bump the font up a bit. I didn't realize that button did what it was supposed to do. So we want to go back to adding interface elements and maybe changing how we're representing those. And then the last one that you hit more often than you think. People might be confused as to what you want them to do. It might not be a problem with your user interface. It might be your directions when you gave them the device to test. So you go back to the testing phase. That's great, because you don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. You go back to the testing phase, rewrite your test scripts, and rerun those tests. Try them out with those users again. So it's a really great set of instructions for helping you stay on track and stay laser focused on what it is you're building. That's going to be the key. You have a very short amount of time. I can't say it enough. So make sure that you've gone through all these steps and you've stayed very focused on one feature and you've done it really, really well. Okay, so that's the app design demo to kind of show you around the app design workbook and get you familiar with a process you can use to help stay focused for that Swift Student Challenge. Now, I think we're probably ready to start coding. And luckily, the app design workbook can help us with that too. So in here, we have a section on slide 86 called Composing Views. And it tells us a little bit about how apps are laid out, especially in Swift UI. Now, if you've never coded before, don't be intimidated. It can walk you through this. There's also plenty of opportunity for you to say, do you know what? I messed up. Let's just start over. And I like this particular section because it kind of walks you through using something called a V-stack, which is a vertical stack. You can see here the rows of different colors, the black, green, and red. And H-stacks, which stands for horizontal stack. So we have columns here. The same thing, black, green, and red. Nothing changed except for the V and the H. We can also mix and match those to build kind of a grid across our user interface that looks a bit like this. You can see that we have a H stack, so horizontal, so we've got our two columns. In the first column, we have a V stack that's got a black color on top and then a green color underneath. There we go. And then a red color. Now we have to do a lot of matching with these curly braces to make sure each thing is in the right place. If we move that curly brace down to the next line, we'll just have a H stack with one column and 3 rows. And the really cool thing is that we don't have to just do this with colors. Otherwise, we'd be making flags for all of our coding. We can also use text. So you can see that we inserted a little hello colors there in our vertical stack with the black and green colors. So we're going to do all of that with a little app called Swift Playgrounds 4. This is what your app project needs to be submitted in, the Swift Playgrounds 4 app template. So we're going to take a little look. Now, let's go take a look at Swift Playgrounds 4. Okay, here we go. This is Swift Playgrounds. If you've never seen it before, this is what it looks like. The icon is there. It's available for free from the App Store. I'm going to open that up. You can see I have some of the apps from the app gallery that were mentioned a bit earlier. You can get those by going to See All. And the app gallery is right here. We have an About Me, Choose Your Own Story, Date Planner, Meme Creator, Bubble Level, Seismometer. Lots of great examples of apps and different techniques you might use in an app. But what we're going to do is we're going to create our own app. All right, so I'm going to hit the plus button here. It's going to create an app for me. My app copy 3 doesn't exactly sing to me, and I don't think it'll really work for the Swift Student Challenge judges. So we're going to call it, this Swift Student Challenge. Very creative name. Excellent. We're going to tap on that to open it up. So by default, the Swift app template will provide you with this content view. That's the main view that gets shown here. I've got an image that's this system name globe that's using SF symbols for images, and we've got a text that says hello world. Now we've got some things here, these dot image scale and dot foreground color. Those things are called view modifiers. So the basic view is an image and a text, and these view modifiers will change the way it looks and behaves. But what I want to do is, I'm going to be thinking about this long term. I want to build an app, and I don't want to just write all of my code in here. I'm kind of thinking like the About Me example. So what I would do is I would try to work through this exercise and then go and check out the About Me example and see how you can take it even further. So to add a new file, what I want to do is add a new view. And that's where I'm going to do a lot of my work to lay things out. I'm going to work with HStacks and VStacks and some other stuff to make my app look really cool. So we're going to go up to this button up here to show the files. I'm going to add a new file with this button. I'm going to pick Swift file. And you can see here that it's highlighted. So if I start typing, it'll change the name of the file. So I'm going to call this About Me. About Me view. Because it's a view, I'm going to suffix it with the word view. And you can note that I'm using camel case and not leaving any spaces between words here. And the only thing that's in the file to start with is this line, import Swift UI. That's going to be the library that we use to build our user interface. So what people see when they launch the app. Now, one of my favorite features of Swift Playgrounds 4 is some of the autocomplete that's built in. They've built a really amazing development tool for the iPad. So I'm going to start typing in view, and we can see that we have an autocomplete bar here. It says view modifier. We can scroll, and there's a ton of stuff there. But this blue little icon there means that if I hit the return button, it'll autofill a view. And the really nice thing is that it's given me a template for what stuff I usually need for a view. So I don't have to remember that there's a var, body, colon, some view, and then the contents of it. It's already there for me. And there's another really nice thing I'm going to show you in a second. So I'm going to call this one About Me view as well. Remember, no spaces in the type name. We're going to hit the return key. And the other thing that this has provided, if we scroll down, is this. It's another structure called About Me _ previews. And it's a type preview provider, or it implements that protocol. That's really handy because if we go tap on this icon up here, I'm going to hide the keyboard by tapping on this button. I can see that, okay, I have my hello world from the content view that I saw before. That's the main view that's being rendered by our app. So if I built and shipped this to the App Store, we'd have an amazing app that shows you an icon of the globe and it says hello world. But down below, there's the option to hit the arrow, and I can see it says hello world. And that's from this view here, because I have a preview implemented. So I'm actually going to change that. I'll change the text to, oops, it would help if I capitalize it right. So sometimes it helps to use the autocomplete. So now it says autocomplete there. I'll hit return. It's very important for case, of course, in Swift. And we're just going to use text here. I'm going to say About Me. Maybe this will be the title for our page. If I hide the keyboard again, now we can see that my preview over here, I've still selected the second one, says About Me instead of Hello World. So let's go make that our main view. So I'm going to tap on Content View. And I'm going to get rid of this VStack and this image, all the stuff in here. Now, when you start monkeying around with the code in here, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have these red errors. There's no need to panic. We can always create a new app template and copy and paste stuff in if we need to. There's no need to panic. Now we've got some spare braces in here. We can get rid of these. And we will spend a bit of time counting through our braces, going, okay, cool, those ones match those ones, that matches that. Now to use my new amazing About Me view, I'm just going to start typing About. And it's going to show up in autocomplete there. So I'll hit the return. I'll initialize it. And now we can see we've gotten rid of the globe. We've gotten rid of hello world. It just says About Me. So now I can ignore Content View for a while and spend all my time focused on this one About Me view. And this is going to be one of many, especially if I'm building up towards a whole big About Me app. So let's use a vertical stack, and we'll add some stuff around here. So let's see. We'll start typing VStack. Shows up in autocomplete. We'll hit return. We'll use the curly braces. And there we go. We have our VStack. And one of the nice things about Swift Playgrounds is we can drag these little two dots at the end and drag them around our text. So now that's inside the vertical stack, and it looks no different than before. If we bring that down, it looks exactly the same. Now we can do the same thing that we did in, that we saw in the app design workbook. We can add just a color. We'll do that in a second. Now, if you get stuck where you have your VStack just highlighted in blue and you can't tap in here to get rid of that space, maybe that bugs you, the visual look of that, you can tap and hold on the space bar, and the cursor turns into a line, and you can just drag it down and delete it. I like to try to keep these things fairly tidy. And we're going to add our blue. Using the autocomplete is the best thing you can do. So now our app looks like this. We've got a fairly blue screen. We've got About Me pushed way up to the top. Big blue rectangle in the middle, all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so that's a start anyway. So maybe what we want to do next is have an image. So we'll start typing image. But you know what? I kind of like that globe image. I could go tap here in the autocomplete and hit return. Now, when I use the parentheses, I'll see lots of different ways that I can display images. But I liked that SF symbol image, so I'm actually going to use the plus button to add my image. So I'm going to go up here to the plus button. I'm going to go tap on this tab here. Let's go grab something that's new. Maybe we'll do a beachy kind of one. I know this is camera macro, but the flower kind of speaks to the environmental side. So when we tap on that, we get an image with a system name, parameter, camera.macro.circle. Now it's way down at the bottom. And it's also kind of tiny. So we can make that a bit bigger. With these system names, these SF symbols, we can actually use a font to make it a little bit bigger. So we can start typing font. This is a view modifier. So we're telling it, hey, this image should have the following font. It's not good when the machine falls asleep. And we're going to do .large title. All right, so that's looking a little bit better, a bit bigger. Okay, so what else are we going to add? Maybe what we'll do is About Me will have a row of emojis underneath our image as well. So we want to make sure that we start after this view modifier. So I'll tap there and hit return. I want a horizontal stack of them. I could do this a few different ways, but I'm going to use a H stack. So I'm going to tap on that. Now I've got errors. No need to panic. Makes it a little harder to hit stuff if you're just using your finger on the screen. This is an older, probably a 6-year-old iPad, but it still works with the latest and greatest software, which is amazing. We get a H stack, and we'll just have a series of texts here. I can get to emojis by tapping on this button here. Siri's trying to jump in and help me. And we'll just tap a few different things. So maybe we'll do some Space Invaders. We'll add another one. It's a robot. And then we'll add one last one. It's going to be an alien. Okay, now it's saying cannot find text in scope. That's because I was a little bit eager. I kind of typed that one out by myself. So what I can do is I can tap at the end. I really like pressing and holding on the space bar so I can move the cursor around a bit more favorably, and we'll change it to a capital T. So way better. Now there are two tools, especially when we're doing layout. Like I don't like that big blue blob in the middle, maybe isn't quite what we're looking for. Maybe one thing that'll help is adding some padding to the whole thing. So padding is a view modifier. So like we have this dot font here, we can add a modifier to any one of these. So this is the brace for the V stack. So I'm actually going to tap on there. Hit return. I'm going to start typing padding. And we should notice that everything gets pushed in just that little bit. And there's a little bit more space. The really nice thing about this is that I've not specified any exact dimensions, so that if I hit this button here, the app will grow and stretch across the whole screen, and it actually still looks pretty good on a bigger screen. It'll look good if we rotate the device and we look at the preview and we resize it. That's one of the huge benefits of using SwiftUI and relying on a lot of its layout capabilities. Okay, so the other thing that we can do in addition to padding is maybe we want to, in our V stack, underneath our H stack, we want this to be pushed up a bit. We don't want that quite so close to the bottom. So we can go after the H stack. So that means that we're going to add another row in our vertical stack. We can use this thing called a spacer. It's another view that's going to push that up just a little bit. Now we can use spacers in our V stacks and H stacks if we want to push things further apart, or if we want to squeeze things together, we can put spacers on either side. They're kind of useful elements for doing layout. Now the other useful thing we can do, especially if we're starting to build towards something like the About Me example, is we don't have to hard code this stuff in here. We can actually make it a little bit more dynamic, or centralize all of our data that we really care about. There's a really good section in the App Design Workbook where it talks about model, and it's back here, model and view. So for a lot of our apps, we're going to have data, and we're going to have the view where it gets displayed. And so we have something like a string. So explore code. And that string we can display in lots of different ways. We can display it on the screen. We can display it in the console. But this is a fun way to exercise that. So we have a message. It could be anything. And we can either print the message to the console, or we can display it, that same variable, in a text view. So what we would do for that, and they do in the About Me example, is they go to the files, they create a new file. We're going to make it a Swift file, and we'll give it a name of data in this case, because that's what's going to be stored in there. So this could be a lot more complex data structure when we get really sophisticated with how we organize our code and structures or classes with constants and variables. But just for this example, I'm going to create a constant here called info title, and we're going to give it a value of my special info. Not very creative, but that's what I want to have displayed inside my About Me view at the very top. Not About Me. So this is great. We have our data file here. This is where we're going to collect a lot of the actual information that we'll use throughout the app. Now I can go to About Me. And instead of this string, we're actually going to use that property that we just defined. So we're going to highlight that. I'm going to go back to the double quotes because I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to start typing info title is what I think I called this. Let's just tap on that to make sure. I may need to make that public, just so I can see it from everywhere. And let's have a look. Okay. So of course I had the screen hidden, but I'll show you what I did. We'll hit stop, and I'm going to show you that process again. I went up here to the file, I hit file. I added a data file. I did the same thing. I renamed it to data. And then it gave me the automatic import SwiftUI. I don't necessarily need that because I'm not doing anything with SwiftUI in this file. But I just create one constant called info title, and I give it my special info is the information in there. I went back to About Me view, and I changed this text from quote, about me, end quote, and I changed it to just info title. So now I'm using the information from that data file. So I can keep all of my model that we looked at in the app design workbook separate from my view, which helps me just keep things a little bit more organized. Of course, you could keep it all in the view as well. We just find that for most people, keeping it separated makes a big difference. We could also do the same with these here. We could make sure that they're drawn from a data file. So that's a very quick look at Swift Playgrounds. When you are ready to run and test your app, you would hit this play button. It launches the app. We can kind of see it in a full screen, which looks amazing. We can also see up here that we've got the orange Swift dot. So when we're done working with our app, now this app isn't very exciting because we can't really interact with it. We'll hit that button. It gives me the option to restart the app, to stop it, to show the project, or to show the console. So I'll just stop it and I'll jump back to Swift Playgrounds. Now later in the week, we're going to meet again and we'll talk about how to submit this to the store and how to generate your project. To share it, you go up to this item here, the 3 dots, and you would say share project. And that's how you're going to get your Swift PM file that you're going to submit to Apple as part of the Swift Student Challenge. All right, I hope this was helpful. I hope this has helped focus your ideas a little bit. Swift Playgrounds 4 is an amazing addition to your developer tool set. And I think you're going to have a lot of fun building your project. I can't wait to see what you come up with. All right, best of luck, and I can't wait to see what you do.